the Baen Free Radio Hour.
On the podcast, The Dead Speak, and we continue our ongoing audiobook serialization of Timothy Zahn's Cobra, all right now. Welcome to the Baen Free Radio Hour. It's a pleasure to have you along. I am Baen Associate Editor and your podcast host, David Afsharirad. Today we bring you DJ Butler's conversation with the authors of Mission Critical. Mission Critical is a Murphy's Lawless novel written by Charles E. Gannon, Griffin Barber, Chris Kennedy, and Mike Masa. It is set in Gannon's larger Kane Riordan universe, but is a separate series in its own right. So if you love the Kane books or have never read them, Mission Critical is perfect for you. And in just a moment, we'll have these gentlemen explain why. But first, the news. Head on over to Baen.com and check out this month's free short story, Black Box, by Sean C.W. Korsgaard. Mankind eventually hopped its way across the nearby stars to Lalande 21185, only to find a few dead, rocky worlds bathed in radiation and a system-wide debris field that made navigating all but the edges of the system hazardous for a large spacecraft. But the debris was more than just stray asteroids and space junk. It was wreckage. A war had occurred in the system, but despite hundreds of scavenger crews searching the system for scrap, no complete ships were ever found. Until now. And if you enjoy Black Box, be sure to check out more stories of ancient aliens in Worlds Long Lost, edited by Christopher Rocchio and Sean C.W. Korsgaard. It is out now. And that's it for the news.
Welcome. This is DJ Dave Butler. I'm here with Charles Gannon, Chris Kennedy, and Griffin Barber, at least authors of Mission Critical, out now in trade paperback from Baen, and also all your favorite ebook formats. DRM free when you buy them at Baen.com, of course. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Great to be
Thanks
here.
for having us.
There's enough of you that I won't read bios. So maybe in lieu of a bio, why don't we talk about the background of the book? Right, the book exists it exists ultimately in the Kane Riordan universe. Do we call it the Riordan verse?
They call it the Kane verse.
The Kane verse.
I mean, my attitude was when somebody gives the name to a universe that is actually the protagonist, like if it was good enough for Honorverse, I ain't going to dispute it. They can call it whatever they like. You know?
You've arrived.
We called it the Kane verse.
The Kane verse.
Yeah.
Or the Terran Republic, right? Is
Yep.
another name for the setting. So why don't you guys sort of tell me the background? Let's start with the background of like the book before the background of the story. Like conceptually, how do we get to this book with 4 authors? What's going on here in terms of like the writing and publishing work?
This is all you, Chuck.
Actually, I don't think it is.
Yes, it is. It's your idea. This is your idea.
Yeah.
It's your idea.
Yeah. Are you being kind or vengeful now? Which is it?
Both.
Both. So at any rate, the really short version of this is about 2 years after Fire with Fire was out. I was there were a couple of nebula nods in the direction of the series. By the time the second book had come out, gotten a nebula nod, people were asking me, "We really like this. Can we play in it?" Fast forward to the 4th book and an anthology comes out called Lost Signals, which ultimately first comes out with the Ring of Fire Press through Eric Flint, and then that sort of had even more people ask. Now, two of the people, Griffin is one of the alums of that. And then you have another person like Masa, who might join us later, I don't know, who was yet another. But at about that time, I also started thinking, more people were asking me, and I thought, well, there's clearly, people want to come to the sandbox. And I started as early as 2015, 2016, looking for somebody to partner with. I examined a lot of opportunities, and I did not ultimately go with them for one reason or another. But I had met Chris in the interval, and I just, there's things you get a vibe about a person, and all the things that he was as a human being made me feel that I didn't care what the other stuff was, really, because in my experience, if you're working with somebody who knows you've got their 6 and they know you've got their 6, and vice versa, there's nothing you can't go through, which is an extremely topically appropriate comment for me to make at this particular juncture.
It really is. And when Chuck approached me, he said, "Hey, I've got this idea. You got a minute to talk?" "Sure." "Hey, so I've got this thing. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like that. Would you be interested?" "Well, yes, I would."
You as publisher.
Really, yeah. And it was, I really liked Chuck, and the more that I talked with him, there's a lot of common ground there, and yeah, I'd really like to do something with you. Back over to you.
And the first person I spoke to after that, after I'd made my mind up, was sort of like these sort of enterprises are a little bit like marriages, in some of the best and the worst ways.
Not wrong.
Sometimes the problem, the thing is, you've either got the sort of marriage where the problem is going to be a divorce or the in-laws. I don't think Chris and I are headed for a divorce.
No.
But sometimes the family can be problematic. And it's been good that we've had these strong sort of initial bonds. And I went to Tony, because Tony is the person who had, the bottom line was, she was the one who brought Ken Riordan and the entire series really into the position where such a thing could happen. And so I wanted to make sure it was okay with her. And she said yes. She said, watch, make sure it doesn't impede your primary production. And I was like, okay, which has mostly been the case. There have been one or two occasions, though, when things get out of hand and you just have to shuffle your time and commitments around a little bit. But in the process, learned a huge amount, worked with some wonderful people, made some really good friends. And I don't mean that in the Facebook term. I mean people that I'll pick up the phone and tell them about my life. So, and I don't do that with a whole lot of people because. Not that I'm shy about the reason, but that's a TLDR. But the bottom line is that now, just recently, why is this book then with Baen if it was doing so well with Chris Kennedy Publications? And it most certainly was. But there was a little bit of a misunderstanding. I thought Tony had said she was never going to be interested in publishing anything from this. Well, I don't know I don't know who said what and who heard what, but the bottom line was at Fantaside just a little under a year ago now.
Yeah.
I'd spoken to Chris and I said, look, I know everybody's going in tough times. There were some concerns. We had several of us, particularly Griffin, for instance, who has momentarily, I think, stepped away, is another person that I've worked with in the 1632 universe. We knew that Eric Flint wasn't well. We didn't know that it was going to become Eric Flint's last year. But one of the things that motivated us was we had these properties, they were doing really well. See if Tony would be interested in them. She could maybe change her mind. Turns out that she was wondering why I hadn't brought them to her yet.
Why haven't you brought this to me sooner?
Yeah, exactly. So
I think was what she said.
Yeah. So I thought you're bringing this to me sooner. So it's like, anyhow. So in March at that con, the process was set rolling that brought this book out first. The way things worked out or failed to in certain cases, this actually wound up being the first one. There are in short order going to be two more, the two that come before this in the Murphy's Lawless series that will be available in initially ebook format and then audio through Baen. Whether print happens will depend upon demand. But these are now the last thing I'm going to say, and then let because I'm coming to this from the traditional standpoint, but we're doing a first, and the first is that these books started out life, and particularly this book in front of you is the real inflection point book, because literally we were ready to go. Chris was ready to pull the trigger on releasing exactly the book you see in front of you for as season 3. But that was
when
like
Tony picked it up, it was
Yeah.
on my schedule for 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And I had to, it had already gone out to the early review team. You know, I'd had 30 people that had it in their hands, and I had to go, hey, write down your review and we'll get back to you on that.
So, but many things have come out of it. So now the 3, there's another one that's already under contract that Chris and I are doing called Admiral and Commander. And this is kind of, it seems to be burgeoning a bit, which was always kind of the notion here. And with that, I think it would be, you know, more from Chris and also Griffin, who has that wonderful, you know, we talk all the time, but there's no view. You know, if you really want to hear what's really going on, you go to the man who's the more outside of the sort of publishing and see what it looks like from out there. That's where you'll get the, perhaps I'm reflecting on this, fearsome takes on this entire process.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Griffin is also constitutionally sort of low bullshit, so he's good at giving fearsome takes. Let me wind back just one kind of step. So this is effectively season 3 of Murphy's Lawless. So we need to talk about what Murphy's Lawless is in a minute here. It would kind of set the bigger context. So the Kane Riordan novels, of which we are now into 6.
6 comes out in August.
Okay.
7 comes out in December.
Which is the second arc, and it's the Species novels, right? No,
technically it's a third arc, but
third arc. Okay, all right, fine. So this is smart, sort of. Maybe it's hard SF tinged space opera, or maybe it's sort of high action hard SF. I don't know. It's somewhere kind of in that space. Setting 22nd century, 23rd century.
This novel kicks off essentially, I think, in 2124, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, it's all part of that, and it ties in. It branches off actually not from the most recent novel that's come out, the 5th, but the 4th novel. That's where the concept of the lost soldiers are introduced. Everybody thinks that they were just there's a group called the Couture that they hijacked them from Earth. They were mistaken regarding the reasons. By hook and crook and many twisted paths, they find themselves fleeing Earth space, along with a lot of the major characters in the main arc of the series. And some of them have to be left behind because cryo units are failing and they don't have enough consumables to support what the total population would be if they all failed.
Okay, so this is Murphy's Lawless. That's the root of Murphy's Lawless. Is a human military unit gets stranded, and I can't remember the number, but it's something like 160 light years from Earth or something.
Yes, that's close enough. And
somewhere out there.
The thing that wants to be noted is that none of the soldiers, the lost soldiers, originate from before 1938. And to their knowledge, none of them come from anything later than about 1998. So you're looking at people who've been displaced, usually by at least 130 and sometimes a lot more years.
And I think the important part to know about these people is that when the units are failing and they have to put some people aside, they don't put the good ones aside. They put the ones aside that have issues. So these are all the people that well, we're going to need this, we're going to need that, we're going to need this guy, we're going to need that lady, we're going to need all these people. These ones, they've got issues. Maybe we don't need them so much. We'll just
the last one's picked
back here. Right. If you had a school ground pick, where two captains were picking, these would be the ones at the end where you take them. I don't want them.
It might also be that they're the ones who they're picking for baseball, but instead they wind up over on the bocce courts. It's that some of the cases are that severe.
Right.
Yeah. And the pitch that I gave to Chris, which he actually didn't let me finish, which was wonderful, because it meant we were on very much the same track. As I said, well, what if we did something set in the Kane Riordan universe that was, well, kind of like Band of Brothers meets Kelly's Heroes? I wonder if, yes, he said, and here we are.
I love Kelly's Heroes.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Stop with the negative waves, man.
Yeah.
It's paint. It's paint.
He tagged me right with that. Hey, how about we do this and Kelly's Heroes? All right, let's go. When can we start?
Yeah.
But then I didn't hear anything for about 2 years. And he, as he went through doing all of the things, and my only issue was, okay, what did Tony say? Because I didn't want to, intrude where, I wasn't welcome. And he's like, oh, Tony said, okay. And I said, all right, then I'm in. I think this is great. I love the juxtaposition of the two. I think there's a lot of room there where we could, make a great series, and not only that, have a great time and give the readers some more of the, hey, what else is going on? And Chuck said, oh, by the way, this is important, and it will come back in later. And I was like, sold.
So obviously, if you've got soldiers who are all from Earth somewhere between 1938 and 1975, did you say? There's
98.
98. Okay. So we're into Gulf stuff. Okay.
Yes, there are Gulf people.
Yeah. So we've got some kind of temporal displacement going on, but that probably ties into book 4, and so we'll just leave that as a note. So that's like, it's a little different then from starting out with fire versus fire with fire, right? You got this kind of time travel thing. Okay, so the original Terran Republic anthology, people were just writing kind of whatever story fit in the setting, or were you directing that at all in terms of like what the stories were about?
Since Griffin had a piece in that,
awesome.
Why don't we ask Griffin what that experience was like?
Well done.
So the Lost Signals it was an anthology where pick your playground and go ahead and do something with it. And so we had everything from Mike Masa and Casey Azell, who also wrote. Mike was in this particular book, but Casey was in previous works in the Murphy's Lawless stuff too. But they both wrote opposite sides of an alien contact and conflict story. So from the alien perspectives, it was really kind of entertaining. There's a lot of really neat stuff in there that was fun. I wrote something that's unrelated to the Murphy's Lawless, but I'm hoping to be able to return to those characters eventually as well. Mine was an investigation of a heist that they didn't even know there was a heist until they show up on the scene, kind of thing. But yeah, we were at Balticon after having, I think, talked about Lost Signals, or we'd already kind of done Lost Signals, and we were Casey, Mike, myself, we had this kind of weird idea that at the same time, apparently, as Chuck had, where we would all write a story that was set in his universe with his permission, but that we would kind of focus on our skill sets. So Casey would write something that had to do with piloting.
I didn't know that at all until this minute. I had no idea.
We talked about it.
It was this many days old when I found out.
We talked about it at Balticon. So we had actually the three of us had talked about it, doing something like this, because we knew enough people to be able to actually do it, like to pull it off. So Mike Masa, SEAL, Navy SEAL, Casey, Air Force Major. At the time, she was just a captain, but she promoted before retiring. Chris has got his Air Force background as an officer as well. It was just, we had, and me as just law enforcement, we figured we could probably bring something to the table. And so we start to talk to Chuck about it, and Chuck goes zooming off on Murphy's Lawless, and we're like, well, that's exactly what we were talking about doing. So, okay, cool. We didn't have to sell it very hard because it was already in, he'd already had the same idea more or less intact. So coming to it was very easy. Chuck is, as he already talked about, was, he had worked with Eric Flint, and I co-authored with a number of novels with him, working on the third one now. And Chuck had been, I jokingly call him the rainmaker, because he's given me a lot of opportunities in the writing field. And in fact, like one of the very first contact I had with Chuck before I even knew him was reading one of his stories in War World back in the mid 90s or early 90s. One of the Baen anthologies from, I think it's Niven and Pornell, wasn't it? Or
yes, that's
the
what
War
it is.
World stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was this opportunity was, no opportunity should go wasted. You shouldn't let everything go by. So obviously we were eager to participate. The universe that Chuck has set up is pretty cool, pretty comprehensive, and there was a playground that he had set up for us to inhabit and to bring these characters into. And as I think I probably evidenced with my quoting the film, I enjoy Kelly's Heroes too, and I also like a bad protagonist, if you can say it that way. They're just flawed. They're deeply flawed.
Not necessarily bad, and I think that none of the Lawless are bad. They're just flawed.
Chalmers is bad.
Okay, yeah.
When it opens up, Chalmers is not a good dude. He's trying to do better, but he's not a good dude.
Sure. The misfits, the slight disciplinary problems, the never lived up to their potential, the guy with
barracks house lawyers, all of them.
Well, and the redliners. Mike's character is a redliner. He's somebody who's he's been redlined for too long, and he's kind of damaged behind it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, my guy is damaged too. He blew up a wedding, F-18 pilot, told to drop a bomb here, did. Oops, wrong spot.
Yeah.
The little girl looking up at him when he did.
Yep.
I'll never
Saw the little girl as the bomb went off.
That's brutal. So okay. So Chris, so let's make this explicit too. So Chris, you are the editor-in-chief at publisher and owner of Chris Kennedy Publishing. For anyone who's watching this, who's not fully twigged to that. So Griffin and Masa and Casey go in to pitch this, and they're ready to pitch Chuck, and Chuck pitches them instead. And okay, so we got this idea. So we talked about seasons. That's interesting. That's a sort of a recent phenomenon to think about publishing books sort of like a TV show, right? I mean, it's really sort of a post-Netflix phenomenon, I think.
Right. We were kind of doing episodes before episodes were cool.
Yeah.
Because we started this, a few years back, and Chuck said, well, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Do you think this will work? Okay, so we'll do a bunch of novellas, and then at the end of the season, we'll bring them all together. And I'll add in a bunch of my own stuff that really makes it fit into the Kane Riordan universe. And then we'll have this one book, and you can either get the novellas and follow along, or if novellas aren't your thing, if you're not the binge person, you can just go for the final product. And I said, okay, sounds great. And now Amazon's doing the Kindle Vella thing where you're getting little pieces all the time. We were doing that before then. We were doing the novella thing, and the first season had 6 novellas, and then the final book, which was Murphy's Lawless, which had, I think, another 30,000 words from Chuck, which really positioned it into the universe. The original part of it, the beginning of it, which was the beginning of Mike's story, was, something that really set it into the universe. And then he had the little interstitial parts where, it connected the 2 books together, which I think at the very beginning he thought would be easy. Didn't turn out to be quite as easy as he thought. He's spent quite a bit more work getting people to, kind of marry up some of the things. And, as publisher, I tried to keep them all, going in the same direction, but sometimes they didn't line up exactly right, which made it a little harder on him. And, he already touched on, oh, it's not going to affect any of my schedule. Well, okay, maybe just a little, but it was really good. So the first 6 novellas came out, and then Murphy's Lawless, and we went, well, okay, that's great. Putting 6 novellas together is a little hard. It also makes a book that's about this big. It's a big book. I think it was better part of 150,000 words.
Oh, it was more than that. It was
okay.
More than that. Yeah, it was a lot more.
So it was big. And we said, okay, instead of doing that, we'll break the season into half. We'll do 3 novellas and then the final book, and then 3 novellas in the final book. So we had season 1, which was Murphy's Lawless, which had the 6. Then we had the first half of season 2, which was Watch the Skies, which had 3 novellas. And then there were 3 novellas that ended up in Mission Critical, which is where we are here, of which Mike, Griffin, and I were the 3 novellas. So we're all passingly familiar with the production of this book.
Okay, so this is okay. So very good. So season 1 and 2 are available, right?
They are. They're available on Amazon.
Yep.
If you want to see what the books are, if you're interested in the novellas, you can go to Chris Kennedy Publishing. If you just go to imprints Beyond Terra Press, that is where they all are, because I have an imprint that is for this series. Chuck and I talked when we started, and I said, well, I'll start an imprint for this, and it's Beyond Terra Press. So all of the things are on the Beyond Terra Press page, all of the novellas and the final books, and you can see where it goes. We're planning on getting that up onto Baen's website. I'm going to write something for Tony here tomorrow, and we'll try and get that up, for the folks that are, Baen only, so that they can see it and follow along. And if they want to go grab those other ones, great. But that way they can at least know where it came from.
Okay, fantastic. So so that brings us to the book. Now, I should say, I have read the first couple of Kane Riordan novels. I hadn't gotten as far as the point where the Murphy's Lawless get abandoned, nor have I read season 1 and 2. So I came in on this novel, right? Let's see, I can't remember who the order. Who's the author of the first? So it's three overlapping stories, right?
They're all mixed together.
Yeah.
So yeah, my novella was first, but the way Chuck assembled it into the greater novel or the full season was there's a lot of his material there as well. So my novella was titled Infiltration. And it returns to Chalmers and Jackson. Chalmers being the warrant officer from the U.S. Army that was put into cold sleep. We should be clear about the time travel that's going on. It's basically the experiential time travel. They go to sleep or they're shot down over the ocean off of Mogadishu, and are come back to consciousness in a spaceship several hundred light year or 100 light years and more away from home, and also more than 100 years away from home. Yeah. So Chalmers is a warrant officer who is one step ahead or behind the law. The FBI was looking for him and found him because he was doing all sorts of dirt. His partner was much more straight arrow, Sergeant Jackson, and tried to keep him kind of on the straight and narrow, but he got coated in the same caca that Chalmers always kind of spits up while he's doing things. And Chalmers is unlike most of the other folks that are the lost soldiers that go through this. He's like, hey man, clean slate. This is awesome. I can be somebody.
Shit on!
People aren't warned. They can't see me coming.
Well, but more than that, it's also he actually has the mental fortitude to go, I could be better.
Redemption.
And try and redeem himself, even if it's just to himself.
Yeah.
And that arc kind of carries from the first Murphy's Lawless, which was titled my novella in Maneater in Murphy's Lawless. The first season was called Maneater, and then Infiltration. So that arc kind of carries through those two stories or those two novellas. And in this particular one, he is given a task that is kind of uniquely suited to his skill set, but he's reluctant to take it because he doesn't want to be a dirtbag anymore. And he's being asked to lean into his dirtbaggishness. And so he
also known as dirtbaggery.
Yes, that too. So he moves ahead and does that and carries out the mission to the best of his ability. And along the way, a lot of entertaining things happen. And we hope that I set it up pretty well for everybody else to kind of knock it out of the park as they went along. I was also able to, because Chuck Sermensch, one of my friends, passed away from cancer during these 3 seasons that we were writing. And I was able to memorialize Moose. Maximiliano Messina was a friend of mine, another officer here in Northern California. And so I was able to kind of give him a good immortality dose there. So
yeah, I don't do red shirts. Particularly with a memorial sort of thing, if life is so cheap and nasty not to give us a long enough tenure here, well, we actually are one of those strange fields where you can do something about that. A little bit, maybe only, but something.
Yeah. So sounds like Chalmers is fun to write. What else you like about Chalmers and Jackson? What's fun about them? What's interesting about them?
Well, it's basically a buddy cop thing. And they're partners, and just like we were talking about earlier, Chuck was alluding to, is that, it can be it's a relationship not unlike a marriage. And with all that baggage that goes on in there, with the unspoken things, the spoken things, and that kind of stuff. So it was also being able to integrate how Chalmers and Jackson are seen by other characters in other people's novellas as they went through.
So Jackson is a much more likable character. He's someone I'd hang out with in real life. Chalmers is, I'd imagine the character that I wrote would not get along with Chalmers. He just doesn't smell right most of the time.
Right. And so that was Major Mara. She has a Confederate, part of her crew is Elroy, and Elroy and Jackson hit it off. And Chalmers is deeply upset about that, and is basically the entire time when Casey Azell was writing Chalmers, she had Chalmers being an absolute jackass on the radio to Elroy. Like every single communication was. So I sat there and
that was the only one that got along with him. So now you're pulling him away, and he's like, but that's my buddy. I'm a long way from home, and that's my only buddy.
So Chalmers is really jealous of the fact that Jackson gets along with Elroy, and he works on that. So that's that dynamic of being like the guy who's trying to be better, I kind of try to be better most of the time.
Yeah.
And the guy who is better, and he can see it. And he also realizes that, like, if Jackson were given the same opportunities that he was, Jackson would be so far light years ahead of him, would have never been with him, would have never presented the opportunity to be better. So how that works in our lives, like in the people that we meet and the people that we encounter and the people that we choose to associate with and help, how that ends up changing our stars, how we're going to be perceived by other people as well. So it was a lot of fun for me. I like these two characters, and that story arc is closing in on its final thing. I think it might be right there already. We'll see.
Yeah,
how it kind of works out.
Yeah, fun. Hey, Mike, tell us about your stories here in this novel, and maybe your key characters.
Well, I'm privileged to have been invited to write 3 times in Juck's universe, including a short for an anthology. One of the things that made it possible for all of us to work so well together, and apologies for being late. I laid down for a nap about 4 hours ago, and my eyes blinked open, and it was 4:30, and I ran here, so I'm concealing my bed head under my cap. Apologies for that.
Well, we're glad you made it. I mean, these guys were really talking smack, but I stood up for you. I'm glad you made it.
It's a tough crew. I knew I could count on you, Dave.
Yeah, I got your back.
That's probably
that Barber guy and that Gannon guy especially. You got to watch out for him, but I count on you. My character, who, like the character in, I think, the majority of the stories, recurs in both the initial or the kickoff to Lawless, which is Shakes, shows up again in Infiltration, and he's was a Navy SEAL who was being sent home under a cloud, being investigated in Mogadishu because he zapped the multinational officer for whom he was working, because that guy was doing some very naughty stuff.
Oops.
And the moral compass of this frogman, which was already kind of getting twisted, couldn't stomach it. So he was on the way home, and he wakes up in a what looks like a hospital bed, a hospital room, but not quite right. And he's meeting his new commanding officer, who's Major Murphy. And like everybody else, he has to figure out exactly where am I again? No, you're full of crap. This doesn't make sense. Which is in fact the very thing that happens to his boss when his boss wakes up. So it's a recurring thing. You have to overcome that displacement, and then he gets.
Mike brings in a great detail, though. I just wanted to say he has them betting on whether somebody will barf.
and the one thing that hasn't been touched on is this is the very first book of Murphy's Lawless. This was the first novella. This kicked it all off.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
So he knows his background. He assumes other people don't. What he doesn't realize is that the Dornani, who are we briefed the Dornani, Chuck? Are they explained already?
No, you can. We haven't gone in that direction yet.
So I won't call them benevolent, but at least they're not outright directionally and militarily hostile as an occupying force. Galactic civilization that seems to be the senior, certainly the most technologically sophisticated civilization. The Dornani have been around Earth for a long time, and they've been gathering intel. So they actually have a much more complete folio on all of our different protagonists, including mine, than is in his officer service record jacket. So his new boss has the full picture, or as full as the Dornani care to make it. And he has to be persuaded, because he's asked to do something kind of crazy. He has to be persuaded to go on the op. And his redemption arc, if you want to call it that, is less about, because he's not feeling apologetic about what he did that got him sent home. Rather, he questions the whole basis, if you will, the legal operating authority for this all to occur in the first place, and it's a legitimate question. And then in a moral or spiritual sense, he has to explain to his boss over time, waving the flag or telling us it's this or out the space lock, if that's the choice, only get you so far. This group of people from all these different countries, because the lost soldiers are a lot more than just Americans, and they're a lot more than just Navy. In fact, they're principally, if I recall correctly, Army guys. I don't remember the exact
bulk
balance.
is Army Vietnam.
Yeah, that's the bulk of them, because they were being collected, if you will, from situations where there were certain deaths. So all these folks are MIA in the official books, and they are MIA to Earth as well.
Just to add a footnote, although I changed the names, every single MIA incident was drawn from history.
So the notion is that these individuals really don't have a natural reason to come together and end up doing all the rather dangerous things they're asked to do. And the reason they were all left in cryo suspension for so long and aren't part of the larger contingent that are more, I'll call it legitimately, doing things together because they were people who were gauged to be reliable, is that these folks, for a variety of reasons, whatever the reason happened to be, something wrong with their head, they committed a crime, they were irretrievably ill, were left in cryo sleep. And that's how they came to be where they're at. They are literally, they're the scrapings of the barrel.
Yeah.
So he didn't choose to be where he is, but he makes the best of it.
Yeah. So this comment about Vietnam, Chris, I'm going to come to you here in a second, but there's an interesting kind of flavor point here that I think could make it a lot of fun for a television or a film producer, which is one of the discussions that we open up with in Mission Critical is talking about the allies these guys have made and their replicator technology, because what they've been doing is they've gotten allies to build for them the hardware they're familiar with, right? So they have Hueys, as we're talking about a science fiction novel and spaceships and aliens, this is part of the visual picture here, is that it's historical U.S. fighting forces armed with their historical weapons.
Some of them are using a different era because it was better for them, or they liked it more. Right. But I think the advancement kind of stops at the was it the M4, the bigger round. I can't remember which one it was. The long gun.
Springfield M14, Chamberlain 308.
Yeah, there you go. See?
So he's the guy who told me, because he's right, because I got sloppy. It's not really 308. It's 762 by 51. This boomerang took a long time to come back, but it's arrived.
This is why I can't be invited to the anthologies, the Baen anthologies, where you have to know stuff, because I don't know stuff.
But people didn't. Not everybody has. We've had people who were one of the ideas for this is, if you go down the list, everybody had done what their characters were doing. And I wanted that because if you're going to do something set in using contemporary stuff, it could come to rely on what I'm going to call TV tropes.
Sure.
But I knew something about all these people, and I knew something about the specificity with which they would approach their stories. And that specificity is in some ways so rare that it actually is a really good mix for science fiction. It's like when you read the better passages of Clancy, when we're not getting essentially, an inside the Beltway tech breakdown, but we're getting this sort of, it's really fascinating to know the details of how these various things are done, and not just the technologies of them, but the methodology of them, which is actually one of the things that they bring, as arguably more than the technology, because they brought tech packets that were essentially brought along with them with the Dornani. They bring an approach to combat which the very combative locals think they know all about. But what they don't understand is there's a difference between being a warrior and a soldier. And this is all about soldiers.
That's very
and I'm going to step in here and smile. I've been sitting here chuckling the whole time, because one of the reviews on the book, you know, mentioned that, you know, this Mike guy didn't really know about being a SEAL, and Kennedy didn't know anything about aviation, and you know, it was like, really? Well, that's interesting, because that's
I
what
would
they
like
did
to
for 20 years.
I would like to put in that Griffin doesn't know anything about being a criminal dirtbag warrant officer. Just so clear.
He's
the
just
avoidance of
arrested
doubt.
lots of them.
So
That's-
yeah, I mean, you know, this reviewer was right on one of the many wrong points that he had.
Griffin Barber has never been a dirtbag. Yeah.
As far as he can be pinned, he never actually did that. But the rest of us did.
Yeah.
And it was funny to hear somebody say that when you know, a lot of us had been picked exactly because we brought that kind of skill set and could write from, you know, a knowledge of what that's like. You know.
Yeah, and I think then I went
my
on. Go ahead.
my favorite review was the guy that said, one, this dude's never been a SEAL, and two, he's never been to Somalia. He's way off. And I'm like, sure, let's go with that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's excellent.
And then on the group page, one of the things that I did was I called or texted or messaged everybody, and I collected not only what they had done, but the cumulative years spent doing these things, and it was well over a century.
Yeah.
And I just said, so I don't know what your benchmark for, you know, adequate preparation is. I'd like to think we met it. You know?
My whole thing about that kind of stuff, when you know, with reviews and arguing with those people is that, you know, you wrestle with pigs, you get shit all over.
Oh yeah. No, I didn't go on the review. I never answered the reviewers.
Yeah, no,
I'm just. It was like,
you know,
that just got me. I'm the one who doesn't have any background, zero background. After the first, we had one other person in the first season who probably didn't have. I think he was well prepared for that, but wasn't a military background. And then we got somebody in the second season who didn't as well. But
is a historian and
yeah,
could do that pretty well.
Really
He's written a number of World War II books.
No.
He brought
Okay, so Chris, but you're up, I think. Tell us about your key characters here. What's going on with them in the story? What you like?
Like I mentioned before, Kevin Bowden is he's an F-18 guy. He was a superstar. He was going places. He'd been to test pilot school. He was going to be an astronaut. He was going to be, you know, he was going to be admiral, whatever. And then he dropped a bomb where he was told to, but it wasn't, you know, Somalia was kind of hard to figure out. You know, you got people that are on your side as long as you're doing bad things to the other people, but they're not really on your side. So some of the intel you get may be wrong. And they may tell you that the bad guy is here, which they did. And he dropped a bomb onto where the bad guy was, except that that's where there was a wedding going on, and he blew up a bunch of kids. And that's why he was on the chopper home, because he was going back to face the media storm. He had done bad things. He was going to be thrown to the wolves. His career was over. He had gone from, you know, an upward trajectory to he was done. And he was ready to be done. He saw the little girl die. It was, you know, he was broken. He was as broken as you could be. And when he wakes up, he's told, hey, you're going to come do this thing. And he's like, no, I'm not. Well, yes, you are, because I'm a major and you're a lieutenant and you're going to do it. I'm not in your military anymore. So it's, you know, there's different redemption stories, and his is more of a, he has to come to grips with what he's done, and how do you go on from that? And you know, that's his first story is Wave Off in the first season. And he has to try and figure out how to adapt atmospheric craft that have never been used for war into how do you make these things work? How do you drop a bomb from this? How do you we've got this target, and if we don't blow up this radar or this communication thing, we're all going to die. So you have to do this. And he has to try and figure out how to adapt things and how to get over himself, which is the hardest part of it. And I had a ball writing that. As Chuck said, everybody is there from history. So the other people that are with him were people that I modeled that, I went back into the Vietnam. He was with a bunch of Vietnam aviators, and I found the people that he was with, changed the names, and all of those people actually existed and did those things.
So that was a real thud driver.
That was a real thud driver. Those people existed, they disappeared, and they showed up in Murphy's Lawless.
Good. That's great.
Interesting. So,
speaking of the tactics and stuff,
so I guess moving to Mission Critical, so he then is able to overcome without going too deep into it and too much spoiler, and now he has to become the person he should have been. He should have been an astronaut. He should have gone and done these things, and he now has to do them in order to make the next stage of things happen, and he's not ready. That's not him. Yeah, Mike.
He's waving to a significant other, I believe.
Oh, okay. I thought he was waving. Okay. So the fact.
Hi, Lorna.
I was very sternly and directly issuing orders for the menu for tonight with no negotiation is what I was doing. That's the way I roll.
Yeah. So Kevin now
Mortadella or death.
Yeah. Kevin now has to become the person that he should have been if he hadn't disappeared from Earth 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the cool things about this was watching these characters, because I'm reading these fresh, and the order was mixed from before. So the first novel, I was second, I think, after Mike.
No, you're third.
You were third.
After,
Third,
Kevin
right.
Eikenberry.
Yep.
And that's right. So having to kind of pick up and kind of carry through, and then I wasn't in the second season. So watching these characters' story arcs kind of continue through that. And now in this Mission Critical, get to, pick up where we left off. But, the mission has changed pretty drastically, like as far as for Chalmers and Jackson. But to also see like the Mike's character, goes from, basically his aside from the insertion aspect of it, he basically was doing the typical SEAL mission, which is train everybody up and make them hearts and minds a little bit, and get going on things, or at least the advisor kind of aspect of it. And then in this one, he's having to develop tactics as an astronaut for close combat in 0G, and it was really cool to first off to listen. I love listening to Mike just tear his hair out because he's got too much. But he's sitting there, tearing his hair out, trying to figure out like what is a practical way to engage in melee combat, which is the idiot's combat, because nobody walks away from a knife fight without cuts on them. And if you're in space, that's really, really bad. So he literally spent as long figuring out those tactics as he did writing the story, because he wanted to make sure it was realistic as realistic as possible, and it really shows through. I mean, it's effing cool.
And I think one of the neat things about Mission Critical, and the second season in general, is getting to play with everybody else's people.
Yeah.
Getting to write some of these other people into your thing, and bring them in and some of their neat little ticks, and getting to play with them. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But some of the characters that actually get carried through are not the ones you perhaps expect. People were in a big rush to kill off this this very, very slimy character from the opposition who was introduced and watched the skies. But he was ultimately the asset that had to be used, the basis of intelligence, the basis of operations, ground operations at the spaceport, communication protocols, et cetera, et cetera. What would tweak, what wouldn't, and how do we make sure he does the right thing and says the right thing? And it's really interesting watching what people do, because that character particularly is kind of a piñata. It's like he's not anybody's Halo character. He has to stay around because, quite frankly, he was too essential. Otherwise, one of the things that you did, one of the reasons I called this, first of all, I had a background in series, in television. So series came naturally to me. I haven't even heard anybody use the term seasons yet other than us. I don't know if anybody has. And if they have, we did it first. But the thing that you see is that people want to kill characters off. And I'm sitting there like a showrunner, because that's really what this is more like, is saying, if we kill this guy off, we're going to have to then introduce a new guy or gal who's going to do that same thing. If we're still working inside of 30,000 novellas, we need to keep this pigskin still on the field for a little while, at least a little while longer. And then they get more interesting. So you're not as likely to do them in, because it's like, I could see some more fun stuff happening with them. Just to say one thing about Murphy, though, which is that Murphy is everybody's guy to hate, and understandably. What almost none of them know, it's a spoiler here, he's on that chopper in Mogadishu for a very different reason, one that he's not aware of 24 hours before, and he has a clock ticking. And so there's a thing in the back of his mind, which is, not only does he have to do this, he understands no one is going to like me. I'm going to be the guy that everyone's going to hate, and that's going to have to be all right, because one of the things is, and Mike talked about this earlier, the idea that it's going to take more than flag waving and organizations which may not even exist anymore to bind us together. What he's looking at, and they can't know, is that he truly is looking to build, either individually or collectively, his replacement.
Yeah, interesting. So that's one of his goals. Let's maybe just some high level. Okay, so what's the setup? So these guys get left behind. They're far away from Earth. They're in the future. What's the goal? What are the Lawless trying to accomplish?
Practically survival. It's up or out, really, when they first get there. Anyhow, it changes.
But they're also kind of left behind as a fifth column against the big bad guys in the Kane Riordan universe.
Right.
If they can disrupt or build themselves up so they become a problem for the big bad guy species in the core books, then that's all to the good. That's basically why they were left behind. Mm-hmm. More than anything else was because they want them to be the fifth column.
The remit.
And it's a stages thing. First, survival. Establish yourself, don't die, and then become this next thing. But first you got to not die in order to do that.
There's so many opportunities to die.
My dad was a naval aviator, and he also had a hierarchy of mission, which was step 1, don't die. So I'm cracking up because obviously you flew air to mud missions, Chris.
Aviate, navigate, communicate, checklist, and briefs. First, Chuck, aviate. Don't die. Chuck, navigate. Make sure you're going in the right direction. Can
we speak, Chuck, to the actual mission profile of the Mission Critical arc, or is that something you want to keep under the covers?
No, I think we can. I'm gonna frame one thing for folks who might be familiar with the Kane Riordan series but haven't come into this. They are in the back. These guys are getting dropped off in the back of nowhere, but this is the back of nowhere of the Corcoran sphere, and that is astrographically significant. And it's fifth column, but it's also what if I was able to materialize Guam when I needed it? So there's a bunch of things going on there. I will pull back. You go ahead with that initiative.
Well, so if book one was being the fifth column and making a planetary toehold, or the first part of the arc, second part of the arc, picking up in Mission Critical, is we need to now move beyond, be ready to defend not just the surface but the system, and move out of the system. And to do that, we need things. And among the things we need is a spaceship, and we don't have the right flavor spaceship, so we better go take it. So one of the biggest challenges, and Griff spoke to it, which was figuring out how do you take a ship in space, and how do you fight in space? Because both those things require a willingness on the part of the combatants to come together, because space is so damn big. It's actually, you have to work at it pretty hard to get the ships close enough to where you can put people aboard one or the other and then fight it out. That's a hard thing to do. But the meta concept of how it would happen came together, and then inventing the ways that you would defeat bad guys in suits in a vacuum while remaining hale and hearty yourself was actually a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. Spent a lot of time bouncing those balls around, but that's the nature of hard SF. I mean, I guess you could call this, it is definitely adventure fiction. You know, that's one of the things when I said to Chris, I said, I think that, the Kane Riordan stuff has a certain vibe. I think it works for Kane Riordan, but I think that there's a huge unexplored country of what I'm going to call ripping yarns. And so that we set forward with that, but still it needs to play by the kind of rules, the limits of the limits of known physics and of presumed or projected physics that prevail in the main series, or the Kane series prevail in this one. And that creates some of these challenges. There have been a lot of challenges along the way, which I've really enjoyed, and when people were first, I don't know who they worked with first, but when folks came to me and they said, I don't know if you're gonna, this is kind of, you're not gonna, I said, no, go with it. Of course, on the other hand, they probably, they were also daunted by the thin guidance pamphlet I passed out to them at the beginning of this. So they probably felt very unguided. There's a deep ironic.
There's also, the Kane Riordan universe is very, very much hard sci-fi. So you want to be true to that while telling the ripping yarn. And I don't know how many of the early NASA missions I read while trying to prepare for writing Kevin Bowden to become a space pilot, and how of the different physics things look one way but actually are different. And I read an awful lot so that I could make sure that it stayed true. There isn't hand wavium going on here. All of these things are possible, and this is how you would theoretically do it. And I really had to push myself to learn all of the things, where, if you're just kind of writing space opera, you can just kind of be sloppy with some of that. There's no room to be sloppy with Kane.
Yeah.
And it was fun too, because you could actually sit down and for those characters that weren't high speed, low drag in their careers in the first place, and weren't, didn't have aspirations to become astronauts, when they're sitting in a shuttle under high G going, let's talk about something because this is scary. They're reaching for that something that they can think about that isn't terrifying. Like, there's nothing outside the hold that we're in. There's thin metal that's between us and space. We are all going to die here, and we're going to die on the planet. There's all that kind of stuff. So to be able to kind of access that as well, because it is a hard science fiction universe. Because those who don't know, which is the vast majority of people in the world, they don't know anything about astrophysics, how much energy it takes to change orbits, all that kind of stuff. So in my case, it was fun to just kind of inhabit that fear of like, well, it's just like flying an airline, only more terrifying. I just have to give it on, take it on faith that these guys know what the F they're doing, because I don't. And I'm not going to be the one that's going to save us if things go wrong. So it's one of the freeing kind of aspects of if you put yourself in that place, which also places the reader in that place, right? That reader can sit there and go, yeah, this is awesome, because that's the reaction I would have, because I'm terrified of heights, or that kind of thing. So
I want to actually call out something Mike did, which I loved, which I don't know that anybody has yet said this yet, but in Mission Critical, there's all this wonderful stuff, absolutely done with the space combat, but the stuff that I've never seen in any other book that Mike brought to it is the argument over who gets the suit salve next or before it runs out, because they're living in these suits all the time and it's chafing like hell. And you've got that plus the way, there's the sort of the black humor of extended missions and things like that, and living in a can with people. And man, you know what? This is why when I invited Mike to come because he was a SEAL. I mean, I invited him for reasons other than that. He turned in a killer story in Lost Signals. But I was thinking, this is going to go beyond the training tank for undersea operations, because no one. I mean, look where they train our astronauts, right? They do it in Houston. Houston has this huge underwater facility to give you the closest experience to most aspects of operating in zero G, other than the vomit comet.
Yeah.
There's an interesting twist, and it's you have to have the technical accuracy, you have to have the action, where you want to bring some humor, because life isn't always just nuts and bolts and mission. But another component I drew was from the Kipling poem called, I think it was either the Centurion's Lament or the Centurion's Song, where Kipling is writing a poem about, hey, this legion, which has been in Britain for like 70 years. The men have their sons are now in the legion, and they've retired, and they're being ordered back to Rome because Rome is falling apart. So Rome is withdrawing all its soldiers, and they have to get back on board the ship, and they don't want to, because now Britain is their home. Their families are there, their women are there, everything they know is Britain. In a similar way, the characters in Mission Critical have spent the last, is it several months or a couple, maybe a year and a half?
You're on a year and a half at that point. Yeah.
For your character particularly.
They've been on her back for a long time, and my character in particular has gone native. So when we first see him in the story, he's wearing what amounts to I won't say quite a native costume, but he's grown his hair out. He's got a leather headband on. He's not wearing insignia, and it's the traditional. All the ne'er-do-wells are kind of smartasses, are sitting around gambling over cards, including people from the planet who usually don't get to come up, who are, who he's tight with. And they're not just, one of the interesting challenges, what do you use for money, right? How do you pay for stuff? So there's a barter economy, black market set up with all kinds of goodies. And you're not supposed to do that, but that really doesn't bother my character, because, what the hell, in for a penny, in for a pound. But he really, really doesn't want to leave, because he now has family. When you do a foreign military support mission, you're trying to train the locals up. The modern U.S. military is very careful to rotate people out very frequently, because they don't want you to build an unhelpfully deep emotional connection with the people that live there. They want you to represent the United States' interests, including when those interests may not always be consistent with the host nation you're visiting. So in this case, he's been dirt side for, gosh, year and a half, and he doesn't want to leave. And if he was a surly pain in the ass before, he's doubly so. And his boss, the good major, is, I think he's, at that point, he's a colonel.
At that point, he's colonel, yeah.
At that, and his personal issues, everybody's got issues, but my guy is kind of selfish. He's focusing on him. I can't imagine being my character's commanding officer. I don't want to just lock him in a room and leave him there. So the next best thing is to send him on a forlorn hope again.
Yeah.
and the Kipling thing is Centurion Song.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's just have one last kind of a little one last point here. Some people may come to this because Mission Criticals and the Baen Monthly Bundle, and that may be their entry point, right, into Murphy's Lawless and or into the whole Terran Republic and the Caneverse. So, what haven't we said that people need to know to step into this book 3? Season
that you can. I mean, you can pick it up and read it as a complete novel.
Yeah,
it stands on its own. You may have a deeper understanding of what these characters are about, but Chuck is, he constructed a complete novel out of the disparate parts that we gave him and made it a whole thing. So you're not going to be disappointed if you pick it up and like, who are these people, that kind of thing. It's you will have a much richer tapestry if you know what happened before, but the story itself is straight up, it's a go through it novel and very quick read.
Yeah. Great story. If you want to learn more, you certainly can. I mean, it's the best of both worlds. You get a full story. You want to go back and see more, you can.
Yeah. Fantastic.
You're muted, Mike.
There's a sample on the Baen.com website right now.
Okay.
And that usually is enough. I'm going to say that if you haven't read any of the Kane Riordan books, you don't need them. And as a matter of fact, there are a lot of people who got into Kane Riordan now through this book because of when these books started coming out. And folks, there were some folks from certain series who were really hunting around for the next thing that was going to feel like hard SF. It wasn't going to break rules. They weren't going to throw the book electronically or dead paper version or dead tree version at the walls. And they learned that of whatever else was going on, they didn't have to do this here. I think the characters are all extremely. This is one of the other things I wanted to do. I wanted to bring the 20th and the 21st century into the 22nd century. There's so much rich idiom, and I'm not going to use it in the characters that are populating the Kane Riordan. I mean, for them, it would be like, if you were walking around trying to talk like Mark Twain, people would understand you, but they'd say, "Did you miss your meds today?" So this was a real opportunity to bring this in. And by the way, if there's some stuff that even the three folks here haven't heard yet, not because I'm holding anything close to my chest, but because there's just been so much damn stuff going on. But there are several things which have come to light in this system, which is it's 55 Tauri B, which is that's another thing. The stars are real too. The distances between them are accurate. And there are things that have been uncovered here which have not percolated outside of this bubble of activity that will have major impact. If anybody read, when you read the end of Watch the Skies, you're going to encounter something about what are thought to be animals that are not animals. And the way they process memory and retain memory is going to be very, very important. You're also in a backwater of the Corcoran sphere, for those of you who know the main series. These are the big bads. I'm not going to tell you much about them, except to say that it's arguable whether they are an alien race or not. And if that sounds enigmatic and perhaps tantalizing, please go with that. But this is the full significance of what are called the spin dogs, which are increasingly called the spin hounds, or the hound dogs as they're being pushed together, are a spacefaring society. And what they have to do, they've always stayed hidden from their neighbors who are very, very ferocious in the other system, the A system. This makes it a pearl of great price because there are two habitable, depending on how hard they are, worlds in that same patch of space. That's really valuable. But there's something else. In order to survive, the ones who are in this system, the spin dogs, have come up with, and other people have mentioned it, this replicator technology. And right now, they're restricted to replicating that which is the best stuff they've got their hands on is on the neighboring system. But the people who left this bunch here were heading deeper into that terrain. They have more advanced equipment. They're likely to run into more advanced equipment. When they come back, what will they have found? And imagine Guam was also a Tesla robot plant, because that's essentially what strategically is almost materializing in the rear area of what I'm going to say is the most problematic polity. So these are all things which are, I think I've stayed vague enough to bait the hook without telling you what fish is on there. But this is my way of saying, for those folks who are Kane Riordan readers, I've told you from the beginning, this is not, quote, a side series. It started later, yes. It goes, but it parallels and rejoins. And by the way, one of the coming up in August, Endangered Species, the next Kane book, which I just saw the incredible cover on today. You are going to see what's happening right before the lost soldiers are cut loose. Because
so what it kind of sounds like there, Chuck, is that readers can expect more in the Murphy's Lawless universe.
Oh yes, because really it's stories. You can come into it from either one. You could say, this Kane stuff is a little too ambiguous or whatever. It doesn't do for you. Fine. You like the Murphy's Lawless, you got that. If ripping yarns is not for you, I think you'll probably find something maybe more copacetic in the Kane books. But the bottom line that we're seeing is that people who like one like the other. And I owe that to these guys right here. I had a harebrained idea and they turned it into reality.
Well, congratulations to all of you. So once again, the book is Mission Critical, out now from Baen in trade paperback and all the ebook formats. Congratulations, all you guys. Thanks very much for joining us here on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Good Archie.
And now we bring you Timothy Zahn's Cobra. Earth's only hope was the Cobras. The colony worlds Adirondack and Silvern fell to the Troft forces almost without a struggle. Outnumbered and on the defensive, Earth made a desperate decision. It would attack the aliens not from space, but on the ground, with forces the Trofts did not even suspect. Thus were created the Cobras, a guerrilla force whose weapons were surgically implanted, invisible to the unsuspecting eye, yet undeniably deadly. But power brings temptation, and not all the Cobras could be trusted to fight for Earth alone. Johnny Moreau would learn the uses and abuses of his special abilities and what it truly meant to be a Cobra.
Eld Yarn had come and gone, and Chris had been working for an hour and a half when they heard the shot. "What was that?" Chris asked, looking up from her breadboard. "Pellet gun," Johnny snapped, already moving toward the door. "You'd better stay here while I—" "Forget it," she said, setting her solderer down carefully and racing after him. "Ken's out there." There was no second shot, but even so they had no problem locating the scene of the trouble. Already 30 or more people had gathered around the edge of the square. More, like Johnny and Chris, were hurrying in that direction. Off to the side, at one corner of the building housing the mayor's office, lay a crumpled figure. Kneeling over him was MacDonald. "Halt!" An authoritative voice barked as Johnny and Chris pushed through the clump of spectators and headed for MacDonald. "Stay away from him!" Johnny glanced at the speaker without slowing. "The hell with you, Lest," he said. "The man's hurt." The laser blast Johnny had half expected to take in the back didn't come, and they reached MacDonald without further incident. "What can we do?" he asked as they dropped to their knees beside him. The other Cobra Johnny saw now was pumping rhythmically on the injured man's sternum with the heel of his hand. "Ventilate him," MacDonald snapped. But Chris had anticipated the order and was already beginning mouth to mouth. Johnny opened the charred shirt gingerly, wincing as he saw the location of the burn. What happened? Challenor got here about 15 minutes ago and told Mayor Tyler they were taking over, MacDonald said tightly. We weren't in any kind of defense posture yet, but Inslee tried to take a shot at him anyway. He swore viciously. Challenor got out of the way and behind cover. There wasn't any reason to shoot to kill, but Lest apparently felt we needed an object lesson. Johnny looked over MacDonald's shoulder. Lest was still standing near the center of the square watching them. Glancing around, he noticed for the first time that 4 more Cobras were also present, spaced more or less evenly around that end of the square. The 2 men who besides Lest had been at Challenor's the night before, Challenor himself, and Sandy Tabors joined them, he said. MacDonald grunted. Chris? He asked. She moved her face away from Inslee's and shook her head. There's no pulse in the carotid artery, she said gently. Hasn't been since we got here. I'm sorry, Ken. For a long moment, MacDonald looked at her, his hands still in position on the dead man's chest. Then, slowly, he stood up and turned back toward the square, his face like a thundercloud sculpted from stone. Keep her clear, Johnny, he murmured, and started walking toward Lest. The action was so casual that he was 4 steps away before Johnny understood exactly what the Cobra was planning. Simultaneously, a hissing intake of air behind him told him Chris also had suddenly realized what was going to happen. Ken, she blurted, leaping to her feet. Johnny was faster, standing up and grabbing her in an unbreakable grip before she could get past him. Stay here, he whispered urgently into her ear. You can't do anything for him out there. Johnny, you have to stop him, she moaned as she struggled against him. They'll kill him. For Johnny, it was the hardest decision he'd ever made in his life. Every instinct screamed at him to step into the square and begin shooting, to try and knock out 1 or more of the Cobras waiting silently in their circle. To him it was obvious that Inslee's death had been a deliberate effort on Lest's part to provoke precisely this reaction, to goad MacDonald into a confrontation where all the numerical and tactical advantages were theirs. But equally obvious was the fact that there was nothing he could do to change the coming battle's outcome. At 5-2 odds, he and MacDonald together would die just as surely as MacDonald alone. And with both of their Cobra defenders gone, the people of Ariel would have no way at all to fight back against Challenor's fledgling warlords. Even more than it had been the previous night, it was clear where his duty lay. And so he clung tightly to Chris, and watched as they killed his friend. It was a short battle. Even burning with rage, MacDonald had enough sense not to simply come to a halt and try to gun Lest down. Halfway through one of his strides, he abruptly let his right leg collapse beneath him, dropping straight down onto the ground. Simultaneously, his arms snapped up, fingertip lasers sending fire to both sides. Petruski and Sintra, at the receiving ends of the 2 blasts, reacted instantly, twisting aside as their own nanocomputers responded with return fire. An instant later, there were twin howls of pain as the renegade Cobra's shots crossed the square and hit each other, and from his prone position on the ground, MacDonald brought his left leg to bear on Lest. He never got a chance to fire. With his own lightning reflexes and servo-augmented muscles, Lest leaped up in a 6-meter-high arc that took him almost directly over his opponent. MacDonald moved with desperate speed to get his hands up, but Lest's leg got to firing position first. The square lit up for an instant, and it was all over. Beside him, Johnny felt the tension drain out of Chris's body. For a moment, he thought she would either faint or become hysterical. But when she spoke, her voice was quiet and firm. Let me go to him, Johnny, please. He hesitated, knowing what it would look like. It'll be pretty bad. Please. They went together, Johnny with his arm still around her. It was indeed pretty bad. Lest's anti-armor blast had caught MacDonald high in the chest, destroying his heart and probably a good percentage of his lung tissue. His arms lay limply on the ground, indicating that the connections between nanocomputer and arm servos had also been destroyed, denying the Cobra even the satisfaction of one last dying shot. Such a terrible waste. Johnny turned slowly, disengaging his arm from Chris's shoulders and taking a half-step away from her. Yes, it is, isn't it, Challenor? He said to the man standing before him, a white-hot anger beginning to burn through his mind. A shame he didn't try for you and your chief butcher instead of your two dupes. He attacked first. You saw that. You all saw that, Challenor added, raising his voice for the benefit of the stunned crowd. C3 Lest was protecting you, as is his duty. All the possible responses collided deep in Johnny's throat. What came out was an animalistic growl. Challenor regarded him thoughtfully. I'm sorry about your friend. Truly I am, he said quietly. But we can't allow opposition to our plan. We're going to remake Aventine, Moreau, and the faster and stronger our first stroke, the more likely the Governor-General will capitulate without unnecessary bloodshed. Tabor came up to Challenor's side. Sintra is dead, he reported, avoiding Johnny's eyes. Petruski's going to be out of action for a few days, but none of his burns are really dangerous. Challenor nodded. I underestimated him rather badly, he mused. I thought he was too angry to be thinking tactically. A dangerous man. I wish he'd been on our side. I'm going to kill you, Challenor, Johnny ground out. You set Ken up to be killed, and you're going to die for that. Challenor didn't move, but his gaze tightened slightly. You're welcome to try, he said softly, but you can't stop us. Lest will carry on in my place if I die. Would you rather he be in charge? And don't expect you'll get all of us. MacDonald was lucky to do as much damage as he did. Johnny didn't reply. Like a surfer on a wave, his tactical sense was riding the crest of his rage, calculating odds and possibilities with abnormal speed and clarity. Challenor stood before him, Tabor slightly to his left, Lest somewhere behind him. An imperceptible bending of the knees could let him jump high enough to deliver lethal head kicks to the two in front of him, especially if the attack were preceded by a numbing blast from his sonic. Lest was far out of the sonic's outdoor range, but if he was watching the crowd for signs of hostility, Johnny might be able to get in the first shot there, too. No! Chris's unexpected grip on his arm froze his thoughts in mid-stride. Don't do it, Johnny. I've lost Ken already. I don't want to lose you, too. Johnny closed his eyes and took a deep, ragged breath. My duty to Ariel does not include throwing my life away in anger, he thought at the white heat within him. And slowly the bonfire cooled to more controllable embers. He opened his eyes. Challenor and Tabor were watching him tensely. Dr. Eldjarn had to go to Sangral this morning, he told Challenor evenly. You'll need to release our phone system so that we can call him back. The two renegade Cobras relaxed fractionally. No need, Challenor said. He'll be back at home in a few minutes, if he's not already there. Our roadblock stopped him on the way out of Thanksgiving, of course. You really shouldn't have tried to get a message out like that. You left us no choice but to move in. There was nothing to say to that. Taking Chris's arm, Johnny led her away.
That was another installment in Timothy Zahn's Cobra, and that's it for the podcast. Thanks as always to Audible.com and podcast theme composer Ruth Judkowitz. Praise, thanks, and gratitude to Charles E. Gannon, Griffin Barber, Chris Kennedy, and Mike Masa, and good night, Tony Daniel, wherever you are. This is David F. Shirod coming to you from a soundproof bunker somewhere deep in the heart of Texas. Join us here next week at the hammering heart of science fiction and fantasy, and keep reaching for the stars.